Welcome to Grappling with the Gray, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making to more clearly see both sides of complex issues and better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Yonason Olson, and I would like to welcome my guests for today. With me is Melissa Hughes, founder and principal of Andrick Group, applying recent brain research to improve employee engagement, company culture, team dynamics, and innovation. Shanna Ross is a doctor of performance psychology, a former Army National Guard drill sergeant, adjunct professor, mental health advocate, and podcast host. And Charles Williams is a retired Rear Admiral and former Assistant Secretary of the Navy, as well as a fellow of Hudson Institute, a research organization promoting American leadership for a secure, free, and prosperous future. Thank you all for being with me today.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
And here is our topic of discussion. In the wake of Jack Teixeira allegedly leaking classified information damaging to American security and embarrassing to American prestige, columnist Rob Henderson wonders if the lower standards and increasing incentives for military recruits has contributed to a less committed class of soldiers. It's concerning, if not surprising, that patriotism and support for the military are in decline. Much worse, however, is the spirit of self-interest that may be motivating enlistment. Rather than focusing on the higher values of service and a sense of history, the military's ever-increasing recruitment budget trumpets how you can serve yourself by acquiring skills and financial perks. Several years ago, my own son applied for a Special Forces division of the IDF. He described the process as 3 days of crawling in the dirt. 4 of the 15 applicants in his group dropped out in the first 3 hours. The rest lasted all the way to the end. They weren't all accepted, but they all demonstrated a willingness to do what needed to be done because it needed to be done. As our generation becomes softer, do we need to relax standards to accommodate the current zeitgeist, or do we need to preserve standards to slow the relentless slide towards self-indulgent mediocrity? What are the possible consequences of each? The floor is open.
Well, I'd like to address the intelligence failure perhaps first, if I could. So I hold a top secret clearance even today, even though I've been away from the Pentagon now for a couple of years, but I do sit on a board of a company that does a lot of government work. Annually, you have to renew that clearance with some training, and it has to be documented and then submitted. There are 2 things required to see information that's classified. One, you first have to have the clearance, and secondly, you have to have a need to know. So when I was in the Pentagon, I had access to as much information as I wanted. I could ask as often as I wanted for a briefing. I usually got one once a week. I went down into the skiff at the bottom of the Pentagon, the lowest level in the building. And when you went in there, you couldn't take your phone, you couldn't take any papers, you couldn't take any notes out of that room. You would listen to a brief and digest or process what you were hearing. I don't know how an individual that was an E3 or 4 had access to all this. There had to be a breakdown in that command structure to be able to see all that kind of information and somehow to be able to extract it from that room with photographs, with cell phone, with notes. I just cannot imagine that happens. So there's a failure somewhere. And I think when Chelsea Manning and frankly now even leadership at the presidential level, now we've seen some classified information get out of control. It's almost as if it's okay. I think some people in their mind think it makes them important. They're almost like a celebrity status to have this information. It is totally wrong, and it jeopardizes the country. So that's kind of my take on the clearance issue.
Well, it sounds like the lapse of standards isn't just about recruitment. It seems to be more systemic than that. Ladies?
Well, I would say to that point is that how did an individual like that, regardless of how it was leaked, but how did an individual like that get into the system in the first place? with the intent of doing that with classified information, kind of tells you, it makes you wonder about, his motive for enlistment in the first place. Did he really enlist for the service, or was he looking for that information this entire time? So back to the question of whether we should keep the standards or keep them relaxed, is my take is we need to keep the standards. And that's what is gonna, I say weed out the people that are gonna leak information or cause things like this to damage the organization. So that's my take on that situation.
Well, I'll jump in. I think, a couple things come to mind. I have very little to add from a military experience. But I will say, I think when I first read the scenario, I was thinking about my kids, and I was thinking about when I was in the classroom teaching, and I was thinking about the difference between intrinsic reward and extrinsic reward, which is what I think this all boils down to. If we give them a signing bonus to enlist, or if they're enlisting because they feel like this is what they can do for their country, and those kinds of issues. And we all know that intrinsic is always much more powerful than extrinsic. That said, I think our country's just in a weird place. And I think that there is such a lack of respect for our military in different segments of our country, like there's somewhat of a lack of respect for our police. And I mean, I think all of these societal issues are trickling down and having an impact at the very foundation of those institutions. And call it, whether it's the military or the police or the Supreme Court or, whatever the institution is. And I know we're not taking them all on in the next 25 minutes, but, so I think part of it comes down to that level of respect. And so, I think from a psychological standpoint, I don't think we do ourselves any favors by relaxing the standards and making it easier for people to get into something that they don't feel compelled to be 100% in the first place. I'm also reminded of the IKEA effect, which says we love what we work hard for much more than we love what we've been given. And so, I mean, there's all kinds of research out there on, if you make it harder for people to get into a group, they value their spot in that group so much more. So, I mean, I think for me, the overarching question is, how do we first figure out where the respect breakdown is happening, and how do we fix that? Because I think it's more about that and less about how hard it is for them to be soldiers and sailors.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you when you talk about maintaining standards, but the problem is not really just about the military. My wife is a career teacher, as was I. She's still teaching, and she sees how it's difficult to fill positions, and it's difficult to fill police positions, and that's not surprising. And so what happens, apparently and understandably, is that these institutions have to make it easier to attract candidates, which they don't see an option other than lowering their expectations. I mean, even we're hearing it about airline pilots and doctors, which is really scary, because I'd rather not have somebody flying my plane who is not fully qualified to do that. But what's the alternative if we can't fill positions and jobs need to be done? You said, Melissa, and I completely agree. There's a breakdown of respect. There's a breakdown of standards. How do we start addressing that internally?
Well, let me just say something how I feel. So when I came into the Navy, it was 1972. The Vietnam War was still going on. We had eliminated the draft at that point, but I still volunteered because I believed in service above self. I knew my father had served in World War II. A lot of his friends had. So, and I knew some classmates that had gone to Vietnam. So I did it out of some patriotic reasons. And when I went in there, I kind of lost all that individuality that I had, because if you're going to go in the military, there is one standard. Either you make it or you don't. And so the program I was in, if you didn't make it, you went home. And if any day you wanted to quit, you could quit. In fact, there were drill instructors, as Dr. Ross might know, that would try to tell you to quit. You're not making it. You're not good enough. And then it was up to you to say, yes, I am good enough. Let me prove to you I'm good enough. So it didn't matter if you went from a Northeastern school like Harvard, Ivy League school, or if you went to a state school, if you were just a high school grad, whatever program you were in, there was a certain set of standards that you had to make. And if you couldn't make them, you were out. It didn't matter again if it was from a farming background, a city background, wealthy background, poor background, you had a standard, you had to make it. And I think if we lose that, then we lose the ability to be an effective fighting force. I mean, after all, let's face it, why does the military exist? To turn an aggressor, defeat an adversary, and protect American interests. If we're not doing those three things, the $850 billion we give to DOD is money wasted. So I think one way you can enforce a compliance or making a standard, and there is that sense of pride. If he did it, I should be able to do it. The guy before me did it. The guy behind me is going to do it. I got to set a standard. The UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice, gives a lot of authority to someone in command. And if you're not living up to expectations, there are things that we can do either to get rid of you with a dishonorable discharge or encourage you to make the standard. And I think that makes military a little bit unique, but the whole purpose of the military is a bit unique.
Yeah, I love bringing in the idea that ways to enforce the standard, because I think that's really where the challenge is. Melissa, as you shared teaching, and I think it starts way back before they even get to the point of, do I want to serve in the military? You know, it started in our homes with parenting and parenting decisions. So we could go way back, because for a lot of these recruits that are coming in, it's the first time joining the military that the standard has been enforced for them. And that is new. They don't know what to do with that. And at least in my perspective, from, you know, being a drill sergeant and a recruiter, it was reminding them that this is where we set the pace, because it's not just you and your life, it's now your life and other people's lives at stake. And so you really have to train them. And it's, you know, starting at day one, knowing nothing and building them up to it. But a lot of the time, I think that they quit before they even allow that process to happen. And that's where I think the failure is that they're quitting before they're even getting to the point, or they're not even, they don't have the right motive. Like Melissa said, the intrinsic versus the extrinsic, to push through those difficult situations and really say, okay, this means a lot more to me than my temporary pain right now in this moment. And Charles, as I'm sure you experienced in your many years in the service, is it's uncomfortable. It's not fun. And it's gonna be that way. And you kind of have to realize signing up for that, that's what you signed up for. And I think it goes back to the softer generation of, there's so many other things they could do with technology, with social media, with all these other ways to reach their goals other than serving in the military. And it's really, I think, come to a kind of a sad point, but there's always ebbs and tides and flows. And I think we're at a low point. And then as we start to break down, there's repair that comes in and fixes it. And then we end up at a better level. And I feel like it kind of does that. And Charles, maybe you've seen that in your 32 years, is like, there's cycles of things. And I think that's where we're at right now, is realizing that we have a softer generation and we need to do something to fix that.
I think that ebb and flow is a really good way of looking at it. I mean, you know, after 9/11, support for the military just skyrocketed. Everybody was going up to soldiers and thanking them and buying them lunch and buying them drinks. And it was a really inspiring time. And they, apparently in the last few years, that has really sharply dropped off. Does it have something to do with a lack of clarity on a national level, what our military is there for? I mean, during Vietnam, people frankly didn't know why we were there. And they found it difficult to support and be enthusiastic about a military on a mission that they couldn't articulate. World War II was very clear. After 9/11 was very clear, at least conceptually. And now we're sort of slipping back in that space where what exactly are we fighting? Who's the enemy? What are we doing? Why are we putting people in harm's way?
Mhm.
I think, I work with, as a guardian ad litem, and I often sit in DJJ courtrooms and I watch these young people, and often it makes me crazy when I hear the judge or the prosecutor or their own attorney say, if you don't straighten up, your only option is going to be the military. And to me, I think that that's also part of the problem, because that's like the last resort to get the bad kids in line.
And a
Right.
punishment.
Yeah, and because nowhere, we can't find any other place in society for you to make a valuable contribution. And I don't blame the military for that. I blame us for that. Like, that's a terrible message to send a young person who's starting their life with or without a basket full of mistakes. That said, I think it does the military a disservice to frame it in such a way that we say, if you don't straighten up, your only option will be the military. I mean, that colors it in a way that person is never going to see it any other way.
Well, that's changed a lot since Vietnam. 75% of all kids age 18 to 25 today can't get in the military. 25% is some kind of health reason. 25% they can't pass an academic test, basic entrance test, or 25% have had some kind of run-in with the law. And the military doesn't want to take in somebody and have to train or discipline these people. They want somebody, because it's not so often that you're shooting a weapon. A lot of guys today they're operating some sophisticated piece of machinery or equipment that launches a weapon. And so you got to have somebody that's got a little bit more capability, a little bit more technological talent. And to take kids off the street that are troublemakers is not something we want to do. Part of this is all about teamwork. When you go in the military, you lose that individuality. You become part of a team, part of a unit. And I used to always say to people, look, everybody is relevant. Everybody has a job to do, and everybody depends on the other guy to do his job. So when things are really going awry, when there's problems on a ship or a unit's deployed somewhere, forward deployed, they're looking out for each other. I mean, they may love their country, love their family, but at that particular time, when they're in harm's way, they're looking out for each other to save that ship or save that unit. So it kind of begins to break down to that buddy system. I'm here for you and you're here for me. And I need to know that you've got my back. And so I think when things like Benghazi happened, when Afghanistan withdrawal happened, I think a lot of former military who had encouraged their family members to join are now beginning to say, I'm not so sure I can recommend the military service. That is really hurting right now, I think, people from joining.
Absolutely, to that point. It's interesting because of the impact, and I'll just say it's social media. You know, there's so many voices for this younger generation, the 18 to 25-year-olds. There's so many voices. They hear it, you know, and there's just so many things influencing them. And I think, you know, it comes back to what they see in the media, what they see here and what they see there. And it really has to be their own reason. And that is something that I don't think a lot of them have within them is I'm going to do this for, you know, my patriotism, for my love for the country, because they hear all those other voices about things that went wrong. And frankly, that's what they focus on, rather than maybe I need to be the one that stands up and fights for my country and does what's right in this situation. And I think just having those influencers and that the voices of social media and so many other things has caused kind of a lapse and a breakdown in some respect.
I mean, young people they can be sharp, they can be bright, but no matter how sharp or bright they are, there's a certain amount of life experience that they are lacking. And, you know, the phrase, there's no substitute for experience. Someone once said there's not much point in saying that, because if you're experienced, you know that. And if you're inexperienced, you don't understand it. So the culture has to supply the structure and the context that guides them how to gain experience, or as you say, Jenna, they'll just absorb it from whoever's the most attractive or the loudest message around them. No?
You know, when you started off, you were talking about, leaking classified information. So it does come down to that. Everybody's relevant. Everybody has a job to do. Look out for the other guy. Here was a guy that was looking about for himself to get some kind of celebrity or some kind of status among some followers he had online. It is beyond me, and all the emphasis placed on how you handle classified information, that an individual would decide that it's more important for me to leak something than it is to protect these interests, to protect my teammates, my unit. I think even about the Supreme Court justice problem, where somebody leaked information before a decision was going to be rendered, that somebody thought my cause is so important that I can violate all the rules and regulations that have been placed on me, because this is a bigger cause that is more worthwhile, and therefore I have the right to do it. I mean, where do people get that idea that I'm more important than the entire institution, the entire organization, which in the case we're talking about now would be the military? I just think there's a real breakdown. There's a movie star who did a TED Talk, and what he said was the desire to get likes, to go out and do something online, social media, and get likes, is like a driving force. He goes, it's an addiction. And if I don't get enough likes, I go into a state of depression, is how he described it. I got to get these likes. And he goes, it's terrible. It's tearing me apart, but I'm driven by it. And I wonder if there's not a whole generation of kids today that just feel like I've got to get these likes or these comments because it makes me feel important.
You know, Jonathan Haidt has been banging that term for a long time. Melissa, you probably have something to say on this.
I do know Jonathan Haidt a lot. You know, I also think that I think it's not just our younger generation. I think there is that kind of vacuum of acceptance and contribution. And I think, you know, to the kid who decides he wants to share these secret documents, I have to believe that he didn't feel like he had a contribution to make to his core team, or that he was of value to his core team, or he wouldn't have. Now the question becomes, who's his core team? Like, who's he working for, right? And to your point, Charles, I don't have any idea why someone would put an entire country at risk to get the accolades or the celebrity status or whatever. I mean, he got his face on television in handcuffs, so I'm not exactly sure what he got from that. But, you know, I think that going back to Charles, what you said earlier about, you know, being part of a team, and it's not just about me, but it's about I'm there to protect the other people on my team. I mean, that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs right there. It isn't just about my needs, it's about protecting other people and making sure that, you know, my role is valuable in keeping the tribe alive. And I think we've got a landscape of loners. It seems to me sometimes that we've got a lot of people without a tribe.
You know, and on that topic of the security leak, you know, I've read that for lack of a better word, pundits on the left and the right are comparing this fellow to Snowden, and in some cases are praising him as someone who is trying to save the country by revealing the shortcomings that are going on behind the scenes. Could there possibly be legitimacy?
I don't think so. Saving the country, in his opinion, everybody can have that independent. Again, it's that are you an individual? Are you part of a team, part of you? Can I count on you when times are tough? Can I count on you to be there for me? And if you're going to go out and do your own thing, then you're not the right guy to be in the military. How those guys get through their training, again, I don't know how he even got access to this stuff. It could be that if he's working cyber or some intel, maybe he sees a little bit, but no way to be able to photograph or to take notes. I'm baffled how that could have possibly happened, but to me, it's all about this standard. You make it or you don't. If you don't, you're out. And that should give you some pride that you go into it saying, you know, I don't know if I can do it. You get a lot thrown at you. And there's a certain satisfaction that comes from achieving, from doing it, knowing others did it and you're able to do it. There's a pride in that I think a lot of organizations can't offer, but the military can. That you're successful, you succeeded in something tough. It separated you from a lot of others. There is a real unique pride in getting something like that done, belonging to something special.
But Charles,
Yeah.
do you think that is communicated from leadership? I mean, I think we're looking at the young 18 to 25-year-olds, but they're getting they're getting their foundation somewhere. And once they get to the military, they're getting that foundation from the leaders in the military. So is it worth taking a look at how are we training them? How are we communicating that sense of pride to them? And I'm asking because I'm not there, so I'm asking, I don't know.
Well, I think the challenge is there, and then you accomplish it and you feel good. And then you go through this, you don't go through the training by yourself. You go through the training with an organization, with a unit, with a team, and you achieve as a team. If you try and be an individual, try and be creative, try and do it a different way, you're not going to be successful. And so it gets broken down. I mean, from the first day you get there, when they give you this drabby looking uniform, when they take you in, and I don't know if they still shave their head or not, Dr. Ross, but that's one of the first things, at least the guy goes through. I think the women get a little bit of a break on not being shaved, but they do get their hair cut. But it's about breaking down this individuality to rebuild you as this unit member, this team member. And again, it comes down to my safety, my security. I used to always tell people, look, even if you screw up and nobody knows about it, tell somebody, because the life you save could be your own. Maybe you're telling somebody something that might save another life, because people can get careless, they get very casual, and maybe they make a mistake. But if you share that information, you might save somebody. There was a pilot who was flying, and he'd flown like 3 missions that day. And his last mission, he forgot to put his ejection. The class would go for the ejection seat. And when he landed, he went to get out of the airplane. He realized he didn't have the ejection seat fastened to him. If he would have ejected, he'd have died. And he said, you know, there's a sense of complacency. I've done this so many times. But he told everybody. He could have hidden it. Nobody would have known. He would have known. But he thought he might save somebody else's life to try and talk about safety and complacency. And I always encourage people, you know, if it didn't go wrong, it's still worth talking about. Share the experience.
Yeah. To add to Melissa, what you said about leadership, and I didn't want to open the can of worms on leadership with only a couple minutes left. But it is one of, I think, the major, I talked about ebbs and flows and the cycle of things is like a lot of the leadership right now in the military, they joined right after 9/11. So they're just now hitting their 20-year retirement. A lot of them are leaving. A lot of them are retiring out, and they leave behind, you know, the younger generation. And a lot of the disconnect, at least that I experienced in my personal time in the military, was as a staff sergeant, you know, I was kind of the bridge of the gap between the lower enlisted, the E3s, the E4s, the lower rank, and the higher leadership. And so many times there was a lot of leaders, and not to their fault. It was just, that was the way of leading for them, because you're in the military, you have to be, you know, you have to hold the standard, you have to hold the line, you have to hold people accountable. And that didn't always work well with the younger 18, 19-year-olds. And so there was a lot of disconnect, and there was a lot of frustrations between, I've been in this, I have the experience, to Charles' point, I have the 20 years of experience, listen to me, because you could get yourself or somebody else killed. Whereas the younger generation just took that as, he just wants to tell me what to do and how to do things, and I don't like that. And so now, as those people retire and the younger people kind of move up, I think we're going to hit a different stride. And there's going to be a different, and it's going to start to transition, and we'll kind of start to see maybe more people as we adapt and kind of evolve into a different type of leadership. Maybe more people will join. I don't know. So that's just a thought to that, Melissa.
I
That's a
appreciate
great
that.
point. Yeah.
I don't think we have to sacrifice a sense of pride in the enormous valuable role that the military plays for all of us with for standards. I think that we can accomplish both, but I do think that this is a different generation, and I think just the way they learn differently in the classroom, you know, perhaps training them differently would apply as well.
Well, one of the biggest things I think I learned from the time I was a young officer, where it was all about mission, and the more senior I got, the more I appreciate it. What it's really about is your people. I mean, the secret sauce really is taking care of your people. Your people got to know that you really are out there for them, for their best interest, to develop that talent, make them as good as they can possibly be. And I think as long as they sense that you are looking out for them, then I think you can get people to perform. And that's why I worry about things like Benghazi and the Afghanistan withdrawal. Do people have my back? Does the civilian leadership, maybe the military leadership has, but does the civilian leadership also have my back? And don't commit the resources of this country, the blood and treasure, into a conflict if you're not committed to winning, to looking after the people you're going to send forward, because some are going to die, some are going to be wounded, and some are going to be prisoners of war. And if you're not fully committed on the civilian side, the leadership side, because military reports to civilian authority, then don't go into a conflict.
I think you also have to be able to articulate and communicate the mission and the purpose and the value of the mission. And what you were saying, Jenna, you know, it's not enough for leaders to be even extraordinary. They have to be able to connect with the people they're leading. You know, if a leader is too stratified, no matter how capable and accomplished and talented that leader is, if the message isn't getting down to the rank and file, you know, I'm reminded constantly of something that Simon Sinek talks about in corporate structure. When he meets CEOs and he says, "What's your main concern?" And they say, "The customer." He says, "What are you talking about? You haven't been in contact with a customer in 20 years. You're responsible for the people who are responsible for the people who are responsible for the customer." And that means there has to be trust.
Some of these kids, you know, they're very young, and they look upon you almost as a father figure.
Yeah.
They've never had a lot of discipline in their lives. And the discipline isn't meant always to be mean. It's meant to be, I care enough about you that I'm going to look out for you and give you the discipline that you need to be better. It's about me trying to make you a better person, a better you, more than you ever expected by being assigned to my unit. So I'm going to try and make that effort. Now, if it's not reciprocated, okay, then we got a different problem to deal with. But if I can convince them that, you know, Sun Tzu did it, Napoleon did it, it was all about taking care of their people, that if I treat you as if you're my own son, you'll go into battle for me and you'll fight to the end. And both Napoleon and Sun Tzu would talk about that, the importance of treating your soldiers as if they were your own children.
Which might be a good place to wrap it up. Any final thoughts? Or can we leave it there? It's you know, it's always, you know, in my mind, I think that there must be a leadership gene, because I don't know to what extent leadership can really be taught. You can learn skills, you can learn techniques, but as you say, Charles, to project the sense of strength, the sense of conviction, and the sense of caring, all through your very persona, that's what makes a team work. That's what makes a hierarchy work. And if we're not producing that to the degree that we used to, then we really have to start investigating the cultural reasons why we aren't seeing the kinds of leaders that we need. And that's a longer conversation than we have time for right now. So,
Yeah, I just, before we leave, Dr. Ross, I'm just curious. So as a drill instructor, do you remember any certain recruits that you trained that either stood on your mind that if you saw them years later, or was it more just kind of a machine where raw material came in, I developed it and turned it out? Would you remember people today? Were there any kind of, I won't say relationships, but but certain expectations of me having produced something special.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can recall a few soldiers off the top of my head that still stand out in my mind that I could see in them. And Jonathan, you said the leadership gene, and you could see in them that there was potential for that. But that was always the case as a drill sergeant, was your job was to pull out that potential. But there was always a couple that would stand out. And I have a few in my mind, even as I'm talking about it, that I knew that they were going to be successful and that they were going to walk into leadership in their future because they carried that with them. And, you do see a lot, you see many faces, and a lot of them, you could look at them and be like, that one's not going to make it. That one's not going to make it. But then there is always, a few that you're like, wow, that impressed. They just had that with that drive within them to be successful, to care, and to really motivate the people around them. And those are the people that you're like, okay, I'm going to pour into you because I know that you're going to take it and you're going to carry that torch and you're going to carry on for the next generation. And so you would be more likely to pour into those people.
Do either of you know a program called Echelon Front?
No.
So I just went to a workshop, and it's a leadership training program, but it's developed by I'll forget the guy's name, but it's all decorated combat veterans, and they're all like special forces and Navy SEAL guys, and the whole idea is to apply the military perspective to leadership in organizations. It was all very, very interesting. You all might find that interesting.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, that's good, Melissa. Thanks.
Yeah, I've heard that name. I can't remember who's behind it. But
He's written numerous books, and I bought like 4 of his books. I have not read them yet. They're in a very tall stack.
Is it Jocko Willink? Is it?
Oh,
Yes, yes,
He may be one. Yeah, he's a pretty outspoken guy.
Yeah, he's
yes. The dichotomy, this one,
Oh,
and
Yeah, that's Jocko.
yeah.
he's made quite a name for himself.
The actual training, the workshop was very, very interesting because every segment was, here's this military principle and this is how you apply it. So I learned, not being a military person, I learned a lot, but it all made a ton of sense too. It was all very logical. So
Yeah, I was thinking to bring that up. We mentioned Simon Sinek, but he interviewed Navy SEALs, and he asked them, how can you tell which ones are really going to make it? The training is so brutal and so demanding, and how can you tell who's going to make it? And they said, yeah. They said, it's not the big guys, the tough guys, the arrogant guys. It's the guy that when they're absolutely miserable and they're exhausted and they're freezing cold and they just want to give up and quit, and they turn to the person next to them, say, and give them support. Those are the guys that make it. And when I heard that, I really was inspired, because it's exactly the same thing Viktor Frankl says about the Holocaust.
mm-hmm.
That the people who survive are the people who found ways to give to others and to support others amidst their pain. And we really started out talking about a culture of self-indulgence.
Yeah.
And when you have a culture of self-indulgence, you're completely lacking that mindset. And without it, people just won't make it.
Yeah.
There is, I know you want to wrap this up, but the Quinnipiac poll survey that came out in March 23rd, I think it was, of 2022. New York Post recently had a survey, and so did the Wall Street Journal, about the declining patriotism in this country. And I was amazed at when the question was asked, and this was the one from a year ago, when Russia attacked Ukraine. If that happened in the United States, a foreign adversary attacked the United States, would you fight for your country? I was amazed at how many people said no. Then a follow-up question, well, what would you do? Would you just succumb to a new government, or would you immigrate somewhere else? And a lot of them said, yeah, I'd leave the country. And a lot of them said, I just accept whatever happens. I don't know where that kind of spirit has been created, but it's a bit scary to me that if we're losing that kind of level of patriotism, that people don't care.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah. And so it's the job of those of us who recognize that we do have national ideals, we have a national history. Yes, we are flawed because we're human beings and nobody's perfect. But the way to respond to flaws is not by ignoring all that's positive, and certainly not losing hope in the potential that we have. And that's why I try to do what I can by having these kinds of conversations. And I'm very grateful to all of you for participating, Melissa Hughes, Dr. Jen Ross, and retired Admiral Charles Williams. Thank you very much.
Thanks
I
for the
really
invitation.
appreciate your insights and your participation. For those of you who are watching or listening, if you have a topic you'd like us to take up, please go to jonasandgoldson.com, use the contact information, submit your proposal. If it's compelling, we'll definitely use it for a future episode. And until then, look forward to future conversations, future episodes when we grapple with the gray.